Hello and welcome to the Port Huron Statement. So this is the introduction to what I'm going to call the Risner story part 2. There is more to the tale, and I'm giving it context because in the microcosm of Risner's story, there is the use of a lot of different tactics intended to, disadvantage, discredit, disillusion, financially burden, the attempts are made to weaponize the law multiple times. So what essentially Risner's full story entails is the purchase of an adjacent lot to a piece of property that he has with 2 buildings on it. That piece of property ends up getting surrendered through foreclosure because of blight tickets and services rendered on the property related to those blight tickets. And then after he loses the property, he then continues to get tickets leaned against the other property for issues on the property that he no longer owned. And then he started to get examples of blight tickets and other harassment where they would reference photographs or video, and they would create descriptions of the photograph or video which would be used in court. But when you actually look at the photograph or video, or when he would Freedom of Information Act request it either wouldn't exist or it wouldn't accurately represent what they were claiming was in the documentation. So they're creating a series of documents that were misrepresenting the primary source and then using those misrepresentative documents as evidence against him, along with other similar tactics. Because of the sort of detail-oriented nature of these types of things, so the goal is to make Risner aware that they're manipulating him, but not to give him enough evidence that they're doing it as a means to elicit a dramatic psychological response and use that to discredit him, and then essentially remove him as a significant player of any kind from the little board game that's being played here. But yeah, with that, I give you the Risner story part 2, which will be continued with the Risner story part 3. Enjoy.
Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, my name is Philip Risner. I've been in Port Huron, have properties owned since about 40-some years. And 11 years ago, we had what they called code enforcement came in 2013, which was a different branch of the inspection division. And they began to notice me concerning a lawn that needed to be mowed. But of course, they got the wrong address, and it's a rather long story. When they mowed this lawn, it was actually not where they cited the property. They charged a little over $500 to mow the lawn, and when I didn't pay it, I had actually given them some money on some other matters that had nothing to do with that. And what they basically did is they came in and confiscated that money to pay this bill. And so that was the beginning of this thing. So what happened was we got into the Freedom of Information research, and repeatedly requested certain information of how they operated, And what ended up happening is I've got some of the emails between code enforcement personnel and the attorneys. One of the things that I did get back said, Mr. Risner owes these bills. Can we just take that out of his, as they put it, his pile of money that we have? And the city finance department said, yeah, we've talked to the lawyer, said go ahead and do it that way. So they actually confiscated the money out of something that had been given to them before. And when it was basically, when I went in to pay it, they sent me a check back saying that they didn't want the money. Well, obviously they wouldn't take the money after they've confiscated the money. And so they wouldn't give me a receipt for it. So they attempted to just send me a check back saying more or less that I didn't owe it. Well, when I ended up researching it, then I found out that they'd actually confiscated it out of this other money. I got all the records over the period of time. And so it created a bit of a rift between me and code enforcement. And they tried to make it look like I was a troublemaker. And there was no, the interesting thing about that first case, the hearing officer did not award them the cost of this $500 and some to as they say, mow the lawn. And it was actually next door. There was a little small $60 fine. And so there was no cost. And we have all the records of that hearing. And so what they did was when they found out that the hearing officer was not going to award them the cost of the cleanup, then they figured that if I had some money in there that they would just go ahead and confiscate it. So what I ended up doing over a period of time, they'd actually sent me the bill for $503. And there was the cost of the administrative fee and stuff like that. So what I did is I started sending them, I carried it in there. I carried cash with the proof of service saying that I'm here to pay this bill. And when I would hand it to the clerk, it was paid within so many days. Otherwise, they were going to put a lien against my property, not next door where they mowed the lawn. They were going to put a lien against my property. So what I did is several times I would go in and take this fee that they claimed that I owed, and they just kept sending me these checks back because it was cash, and they didn't want to put the cash in the mail. And they finally sent me one piece of paper saying that, well, you don't owe anything. Well, they never gave me a receipt for my money. And I couldn't get them to give me a receipt for that $500 and some that they confiscated. We have good records of where they actually took it out of this other money. There was about $7,000 I ended up giving them. One time I said, well, they're not going to give me my receipt. I'll just carry it over to the city attorney. And I put it in an envelope and with a proof of service, and I said, well, here's this money for this. And so the city attorney ended up hauling it up to the city hall, and I guess they put it in the treasury. They tried to send me another check, and even though that bill was supposed to be mine, what it ended up happening was they realized that they had made a terrible mistake because they mowed the lawn.
Sorry. Okay, so, excuse me. Terrible mistake, and then the audio went. That was my mistake. But
Are you ready?
Yep.
So, to bring you up to date, they realize that if they take this money that I'm giving to them in cash with a bill for that address, they realize we didn't mow that lawn. And once it was brought to their attention, well, we can't accept this money. But they had already confiscated it. So they wouldn't give me a receipt for the money that I handed them, and they wouldn't give me a receipt for the money that they confiscated. So it put them in a real dilemma financially. And so it just continued to where what ended up happening is in 2018, we finally had a hearing. Basically, the lawyer, the city attorney says, we need to settle this with this fellow because he just keeps bringing this money in here to pay this bill. We can't accept it because it was illegitimate to begin with. So we made an appointment for the 28th day of, I think, January of 2018. And they were very cordial. We went in there and said he had a meeting with the city manager, and he had all this paperwork. I'd given him about $7,000, just kept giving it to him, kept trying to pay this bill. Well, he was very cordial about it, and he said, Mr. Risner's here, said he owns property. And they had this, what it was a memorandum of understanding. And it basically said Mr. Risner owns property. There's been an issue that Mr. Risner paid a certain amount of money. He feels like he didn't owe that. It was a rather cordial thing. They were trying to, as he put it, amiably settle this matter, and said that on it that Mr. Risner agrees that if we give him this certain amount of money, that he will not hold the city, any city officials, city contractors, any person, any department. I mean, he's just a complete.
Yeah.
So when they shoved it across the table, wanted me to sign it, they were going to give me $7,000 of this money that I'd given them. I looked at it, and so I said, I'll think about that. Well, they thought I was going to sign it right away. So they realized that I wasn't taking that money. So it sat there for close to 2 years. Well, policy is 24 months. If somebody pays something and they didn't owe, they have to send it to the state. So they sent it to the state, and of course I got record of it, and of course I didn't claim it from the state. Because that was just the very beginning of this matter. So the thing culminated into the code enforcement department personnel. They were angry with me because I wasn't settling this matter the way they wanted me to just, And what it did, that agreement said that whatever we've done, Mr. Risner will hold us harmless, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah, what you're really talking about is coordinated collusion to harass you financially and through other mechanisms to get you out of town and make it so that you either just completely submit to whatever the city demands of you, right, or they're going to sabotage you.
Well, basically they made it look like, and I got some of the emails back. One of them, I'll just share this very briefly. This has to do with they sent me a notice on the 17th day of, I think it was September 2017, and says you have your sidewalk in front of your property is messed up, and by rules you have to repair that, have a contractor do it, all this legit stuff. You have so many days to do that. So I looked at it and I said, well, wait a minute. I said, and they said that there's supposed to be 16 sections of concrete. Well, I went out and I looked in front of my house. You can't get 16 sections of concrete. They're like 4x4 pads is what they are. You can't get that on my property. And what they were talking about next door. And there we go again, vacant property next door. So I called, and I knew it wasn't my property. I said, would you send me a picture of that? And he sent a picture. Said, here it is, a photo of it. And of course it wasn't even in front of my house. It was next door. And he said, you have a certain amount of time if you don't fix it. Said, we'll have a contractor do it. And said it would be, billed against the property. It's what they call a special assessment. And so what they did was, I was actually out of town. I didn't give it any attention. I come back and here they had completely repaved this section, which they'd already sent me the photograph of it. And So I called the city, and they sent the planning department out because I wanted to talk to them. And I had the photograph of it, and they were saying that my property had 16 sections of concrete, was in horrible shape, that they repaired it. So when the city planning department came out, I met him. He was very cordial. I showed him the photograph, and he says, I said, well, can you show me where this is at? And he looked at it, and he saw it wasn't my property. And he says, oh, this is over there. So now he's admitted that repair was not even done on my property. So he left, and what we ended up doing was there was a bill for $702. Well, what I did was I put $702 in an envelope with a proof of service with this bill that was supposed to be on my property. I took it up and handed it to the street department, and supposedly they took it over, hand carried it over to the treasury, put it in the treasury, and I didn't hear much of anything back from them, and so I said, I'll just pay that again because I want to make sure I get my receipt for my work that they done on my property. I went and took it up, $702 again with same proof of service, handed it to the city treasurer. And I think he knew what was going on. He said, well, I'll make sure this gets to the right place. So they put that in the treasury. So here's twice that I paid this $700 bill for sidewalk work that wasn't even done on my property. So then they said something to the effect that the charges were $100 per section, between $75 and $100 per section. I got that communication from them, so I said, well, $700 ain't going to cover that. So I took another $500 down there and handed it to them because if they said it was supposed to be $100 a section, that doesn't cover it all. And they put that in the bank and never sent it back to me. And so there was another $400. I said, well, I want to make this right with them. I took it down and put in another envelope. So it had been about $1,602 is what it was going to be. I got all the records of it that I'd handed them in cash for the 16 sections of concrete, the pad or the sidewalk. Well, I no more than handed him that last $400. I took it to the street department, and I got back home about an hour later, and all of a sudden I got a phone call. Mr. Risner. I said, yeah. He said, you came in here and gave us some money today. I said, oh, who told you that? He said, a secretary let me know. I said, well, she got a name? He kept saying a secretary. So he's not going to tell me who it was to give it to us. It's a system. So he said, you don't owe us this. And I had already got an email between street department and other departments. And one of the emails said, we are not to be speaking or have any conversation with Mr. Risner. So it was, in other words, let everybody in the department know that we're not supposed to talk to him about this matter. And so because I already had that, I didn't have it in front of me, but I had it in my head. I said, this is what he said. I said, who is this? He said, so. I said, well, you're not supposed to be talking to me. He said, I caught him off guard. I said, well, no. I said, I got the email here that you're not supposed to be speaking to me. And so what I did is I ended up writing a letter. And I think I hand carried it up with a proof of service. I said, you tell me that you received some money from me from a period secretary. I said, that's a strange name. You said I'd like to know what her first name is. You said a secretary. I got to believe that her last name is secretary, so her first name must be just A. So, of course, he's not going to tell me who gave it to him. So, anyway, they ended up getting $1,602 out of me, and they're trying to give this back in the worst way. And so that was the kind of the situation with the sidewalk and the lawn. And then, of course, this thing got even over on another piece of property. We'll discuss that in a minute. So what ended up happening is I ended up giving them over $20-some thousand in cash. And they're trying to give this money back to me. So I went to the city attorney calls. Mr. Risner said, I said, he says, so I actually went to his office. And he's trying to override what everybody said at City Hall. And of course, this is code enforcement superintendent. She was actually a police officer because the police department was over code enforcement for a period of time. Then they kind of separated that. So she sent me this bill saying that if I didn't pay it, that I was going to have a lien on my property, and you owe this bill. This was concerning the lawn and stuff. She says. So I went ahead and paid it. Well, anyway, when it got back to the city manager, all this, what had happened, that big mess up that they had my money. So I went to see him, and he said, well, Mr. Risner said, you don't owe this money. I said, what do you mean I don't owe it? I said, am I supposed to believe you? I said, a police officer told me I owed it. See, what you got to do is you got to dumb down. I said, why would, he said, well, you don't. I said, what do you mean? I said, am I supposed to believe you over this police officer? So I kind of humiliated him a little bit there. I wouldn't go, why would I believe the city attorney when the police officer told me I owed it? So this thing just ended up year after year after year, and they're doing their level best to give this money back to me, and I won't take it. I won't take it.
We should get into the signs, actually.
Oh, well, what ended up happening was I said, okay, we're going to put up some signs, and we're going to put some what the court said, or the hearing officer said. Oh, and some of the stuff he said, I'm not going to give them this fine. They're going to put. So all this stuff was put on transcript, and what he said, what I said, what the city said. Now they come out and they see these signs that's got what they said. Well, one of the street departments, they tried to send me a check for $3,813. Of course, I'm not going to cash that check. So I took the check and I blew it up real big, and it had the city manager's and the finance department's signature on it. And I blew it up real big, and I put on there, I said, now the city's attempting to give Risner back his money, blah, blah, blah. And so they found out, they come over and the city, I think a street department, he gets on the phone and he's walking by and taking pictures of this big sign with his check that they were supposed to give me. And I had the check, but I wasn't about to cash it. And so he emails, I got the email back from the finance department, says, Risner's got this big sign out here, such and such and such, saying all this other stuff like that. And so the finance department said something, this thing has gone viral, said this, it's on YouTube, and this is really getting ugly and stuff like that. This is all this email between the two of them. And so what ended up happening was